Okay, last talk, and it's super encouraging to see how many people seem to be on the same journey as us, so that's great.
Sorry.
So this is just a few pictures of some of our places showing nature, beauty and history in Gloucestershire. I'm Jonny, a General Manager in the National Trust with the joyful responsibility of caring for and improving a brilliant cluster of places in the Cotswold countryside for people and nature. And Max is the excellent Facilities Manager with a remit over the whole of that area, looking hard at accessibility and inclusion. Max and I are here to tell you a bit about our journey to where we are now. We feel we're at the beginning of something exciting. It's a bit odd, you may think, talking about a journey to get to the beginning, but I hope the meaning will become clear in the next 10-15 minutes. I'm going to talk briefly about the National Trust strategy when it comes to inclusion, accessibility and diversity. Then we'll talk a bit about our portfolio of places, and Max will outline where we are now and the work and conversations we are beginning. This does feel exciting to us, and let's be honest, there have been a few National Trust false dawns on this topic, but now does feel different. There is a genuine executive team weight behind this work, there is team belief, there is a freedom within a framework to try some things. There are even funding routes and some internal support to do better. So, for instance, our exec has prioritised £3 million for 3 years to improve access standards for disabled people at our places, trying to bring the consistency up across the country. This is our National Trust strategy on a page. To be clear, I don't expect anyone to try and read it here. But I just wanted to pick out a few key things. So these coloured boxes in the middle are work areas broken down, and that's the looking after, land and nature, curation and experiences, urban places, growing support, and people and resources. And then these two long bars below are the priorities cutting across and cutting through everything that we do. Of those, the top one, priority one, is everyone welcome. Everyone welcome, as it's called, is then further broken down into 3 areas internally of the National Trust. So 1, our own people, and that's work such as training, awareness and confidence on various topics. And then 2, our supporters, and 3, places. The places is a particular focus for us in Gloucestershire, making our places more accessible and inclusive. Doing that for visitors, for staff, communities, volunteers, members, neighbours, tenants, landowners, farmers, you name it. Undoubtedly, it is a huge remit and a huge responsibility. So, alongside that strategic priority, and at the beginning of this strategy period in 2020, we changed the description of our belief in the top left here. From that, of forever for everyone, to for everyone forever. This is a big statement, which raised the importance of our work for all people. It's not just a reordering of words, it's a shift of mind from, oh, we'll look after places for the long term and, oh, by the way, we'll do it so they're always there for people, to we are here for all people and we'll care for places in a way that they are there for all people forever. It's a massive shift, really. So I guess you could say that's all very well, but what does it mean in actions and change locally? At my level as a manager of places, well, we've really picked up on the need and challenge to increase access to the outdoors and to focus on opportunities for people and nature to connect. It's something we know we can do. In that, one of our main aspirations in recent years has been to work more in partnership with all communities. And that's meant new staff roles, new projects and particularly new approaches. It is why, in fact, through our connection with Ismail from Barwood Trust, that we are talking here today. It has taken us a degree of humility and willingness and recognition that we can't possibly know what people's lives involve. It has taken a recognition too that who we get to our spaces is not just an output of where we put our marketing efforts. So this is our ambition nationally by 2030 to become the go-to provider of entry-level experiences in the outdoors. The National Trust was formed in 1895. It now owns about 1% of the UK landmass, a very significant 250,000 hectares. It has 5.7 million members. It has nearly 12,000 staff and almost 4 times as many active volunteers, donating 2.5 million hours of volunteer effort a year. We had 20.5 million visits to pay for entry properties in 21-22, but we know that is peanuts compared to the numbers of outside visits. So we know for inclusion and to positively impact the most people, we need to do much, much more in the outdoors. The pure scale of our organisation demands that we take this challenge seriously and showcase as much as we are able. To that end, the National Trust has started some good work and established some national partnerships with the likes of Alzheimer's Society, Access for All UK, RNIB for Sight, RNID, and National Children Deaf Society for Hearing. Those partnerships especially are to start training and working through with our own people. More than a toe in the water, it's much more significant than that. But we haven't always been in this place. So, embarrassingly, these are from my world. These pictures are from Lodge Park in my portfolio. A Grade 1 listed building built in the 17th century is a grandstand with an accompanying Grade 1 listed landscape, a landscape we are now restoring to its original design. The building is small and beautiful, built to show off with and to look out from, especially from either the balcony or the roof. The picture here on the left is of the main staircase, the only visitor route to get to those key places. When I started around 2011, it was pretty consistent that a couple of people a season would take a tumble down those stairs and crumple into the wall at the bottom. I remember one specific incident report with a photo of a bloody stain on the wall at the bottom where the crumple had happened. So clearly that was something that couldn't continue, lest we start to get blamed for it. So we ummed and ahed about it all, we spoke to curators, we talked in depth about how important the oak staircase was, and then worked through all the options. We ended with a nice sign at the top and the bottom, reminding people to please hold the handrail, and encourage staff and volunteers to warn people of looking at the paintings without watching where they were going. So now people did stop throwing themselves down the stairs in the same numbers, actually, but clearly it's not accessibility in action in any way, or in any way a consideration of everyone. It is, of course, actually only helping people who already come to the building, and then only people who can use the stairs, and then only people who want to. It's not very strategic all round. Then in recent, this is so embarrassing, but then in recent years we put in 2 accessible bays too, hoping that will mean more people would like to come. However, in an access audit at another site, we found that some wheelchairs, and this is interesting hearing your talk, couldn't get to our welcome signage or to our parking machine. Or even at one site, due to a drainage pipe and awkward lie of the land, a wheelchair user couldn't really leave the car park unaided at all. Now, that is clearly not good enough, and not just a bit of that parking machine. There are many more examples, in fact, I could use over time of individual little attempts to do a thing that would make accessibility better. Things like knowing we needed more way markers, but then prioritising how they blend in with the surroundings, and so are not as legible as they should be. All of those things are part of the journey to getting here. Thankfully, where we are now, though, is that we're in a space where we're looking at, from the outset at our spaces, and what our offer could be, and taking on more insight. What could it be for everyone? What does that even mean? And we've started talking to those who have different lives and perspectives to our own, and talking to those we may be able to co-design our whole offer within the realms of what we can do. We're starting to speak to community leaders and experts, and we are now ears and eyes open, clear on our goals, because we are for everyone, forever. And we are equally clear that we don't know all the answers. At Lodge Park, just to finish the narrative here for the slide, we are now working on making the landscape more accessible all round. We're looking to make loos available without the building. We're looking to open the landscape when the lodge itself is closed. We're looking at surfaces, at signage, and the location of the car park. In fact, the whole experience more fundamentally. Okay, so Max now will carry on with more about what we've started in Gloucestershire with the help of some excellent partners. So I've made it quite sweaty, that microphone.
Thankfully I have my own. Hello everybody. This is a picture from our site. This is Hairsfield Beacon around Stroud, part of our portfolio in the Cotswolds. The portfolio that Jonny and I care for has around 1.5 to 2 million annual visits across 3,500 hectares. The places include areas with designations of National Nature Reserve, Special Area of Conservation, Site of Special Scientific Interest, and Scheduled Ancient Monuments. There is common land, there is farmland, long stretches of the Cotswold Way, and the bulk of the portfolio sits in the area of outstanding natural beauty that it is. We have more than 100 let buildings, 7 holiday lets, and several iconic Grade 1 listed buildings. We are a sample, it changes everywhere you go. But predominantly, this is hills and valleys. Beautiful spaces to be, lovely places to relax, places for peace, for social gatherings, for experience and refreshment. Gloucestershire, if you've been, is a rural county, and the portfolio showcases that excellently. We are, under the strategies of the National Trust, operating our own local plan that we're empowered to do, which takes that strategy and turns it into action for our day-to-day work, but also through projects, which include projects that transform nature and entire landscapes through biodiversity, creating big nature improvements, and perhaps most relevant to this conference, improving access to the countryside and introducing some human diversity. We must balance habitats and conservation with ensuring that the people have access to this country's beautiful countryside. We're looking at everything from pathways, gates and car parks, to toilets, cafes, play trails, and things to do, reasons to come. What I'd like to share with you, through a couple of slides, is more on how we're trying to take this beautiful part of the country and create a more accessible and inclusive experience for everyone, putting all the things being talked about here over these couple of days into practice. Not my words, the words of a much brighter man than myself. I'll read them out for those who perhaps need that to be done for them. It is folly to say you know what is happening to other people. Only they know if they exist. They have their own universes of their own eyes and ears. The hardest assumption to challenge is the one you don't even know you are making. The idea from Douglas Adams, writer of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is sharing here is that we are masters of our own perspectives, you know that very well, but we're novices of others. Something we've become incredibly aware of, and this journey that we find ourselves on is a partnership to open those perspectives. Some of our national and local partners are in this room. Hello. Through our partners, we gain new perspectives. We have new roles and experts internally within the Trust, which help us with developing these perspectives and relationships. Now, Jonny and I aren't experts in minoritised or underserved communities. We admit that. In fact, we had a small degree of imposter syndrome about being asked to be here today. But we feel that we're developing relationships with people who offer a lot more insight than we ever could. And that's okay. We're proud to have taken that step. Okay, you've built it. Why aren't people coming? It's their fault. Thinking back a little bit to Jonny's example where he mentioned we'd installed some accessible car parking spaces but then found that our car park wasn't accessible. So we're finding people weren't using those spaces. We have a car park full to the brim and accessible parking spaces sat empty. People aren't coming because we aren't speaking to them. We found that rather than finding out too late that we've not built the right solution for our audiences, we want a process in which accessibility and inclusion features as a key point in the scope of the project, involving key people from start to finish. For our partnership working, both learning from organisations on similar journeys, such as wildlife trusts, and supporters such as Barnwood Trust and the Cotswolds AOMB, we're learning more about how we should be engaging communities and people to make them feel welcome and want to get involved. It's not that minority communities don't want to come and access nature. Actually, many people in communities do, and they're crying out for it. What we've learned is that we don't understand the hurdles that people face every day in their communities. We lack the perspective. We're learning from people who live in minority communities that countryside has not been aimed at them in the past. And they're worried that some people may not feel welcome. Some minority communities live in urban areas and transport may be an issue for them. Some have concerns about how other people or animals use the space. Some need specific facilities available to them for moments of prayer, or specific people in a group may require help getting around. We've learned that when we speak to communities, we should aim to remove the transaction from the conversation. Focus more on learning what they say rather than trying to pitch a visit to them and get an extra £1. Learn what they need, what they feel, what they like, and see if they would be interested in creating a countryside that they feel welcome and safe in. We've also learned that there are cultures within cultures, and that different cultures may want different things from each other. So we're now speaking to more people to help identify those differences and understand them. Through our access audits, which we've completed with a local charity called Inclusion Gloucestershire, and with help from experts through experience such as Craig Grimes at Experience Community, we've learned from people who live with disabilities that actually leaving the house can be quite a lot of work, a lot of effort. Some people might need to organise transport that's not readily available to them. They may need to check that they have facilities available to them when they get there, that they'll have phone signal in case they need help, that inclines are manageable. They may need to be able to escape any overwhelming environments with ease. Even the house in itself may be overwhelming for various reasons. Imagine going through all of that, and what you get at the end of it is a flat, empty, boring field by the side of the road because that's where you were able to do it. It's rubbish. The experience that people leave the house for has to be worth it, or we've missed the point and no one will come. Similarly, in no conversation we've had, and I think that's already been mentioned, has anyone asked us to sanitise the experience by putting tarmac through the fields, getting rid of all the sheep poo, flattening every hill. We've been asked to keep the countryside beautiful and focus on getting rid of a few gates, tidy up a couple of tracks, make them more wheelchair accessible and bike accessible and cycle accessible. Create a space free from dogs, whilst also making sure that there is a space where dogs feel welcome somewhere else. Smaller changes can make the biggest differences. We're asking questions to find out how are we not being inclusive or accessible, so we have to do something about it. We want to understand what is important to communities. What do they want from their outdoor experience? What do they need to be able to get there? And most importantly, we're changing from this, okay, I built it, why won't you come, to how can I work with you to build something that benefits your community? So, looking at our projects going forward, and based on our learnings so far on our journey, we're developing a bit of a process in our portfolio about how we approach our projects, ensuring we bring all communities along with us, inclusive of faith groups, parish councils, disabled people and minority groups, within communities who may perhaps feel isolated, and whoever else is positioned within our communities and the wider tourist community. Our projects all begin in different places, so it's not a rigorous process, but here are some examples of what we are doing. And one of our projects is here, this is at Woodchester, also around the Stroud area, where we're trying to start from scratch. It's a new site for us, so we have that opportunity for us. So we start with access audits, an opportunity to identify what we have and what we lack. So particularly if you can involve people with lived experience, we found that access audits are something that can be used as a benchmarking tool. We have to return to them, but they are incredibly useful for identifying both what you have that is already accessible and what could act as a barrier for different groups. We're clear that we'll follow through with our actions and possibly re-audit later in the process. An added bonus to working with local people with lived experience is that they may have insights or connections to other local groups or individuals with different lived experience or the same. We may be able to get them to site. We've gained a lot of insight through the audit days, so if you do an access audit, I know they were mentioned yesterday, walk around with them and listen to them and ask them questions. It's important that we have a clear picture of why we're engaging with communities. Taking out that transaction is key. Everyone is welcome to our sites, and we want to ensure that this is reflected in what we offer to people. Welcome means so much more than a smiling face. Those extra steps we take for people to meet their needs really make a difference. As a national organisation, we're visited by people from all backgrounds, both locally and internationally. Whilst our tourists may come once or twice to a site, our local community 2 miles down the road could come every week, or even more often. So we know we need to understand that demographic in our local communities better. It's incredibly important, we've learned, to look beyond the numbers on the paper you might find in a census. Communities create themselves, perhaps based on location, identity, organisation or other intentional communities. We've learned that a person having a disability, for example, does not mean that they necessarily consider themselves a part of a disabled community. They define their identity. There is an emphasis for us to understand that demographic. You can't do that without getting out of your chair and speaking to people. We're looking at introducing other perspectives as part of our design processes in projects. So we're working with co-designers to assist us with engaging and helping us develop a brief that services our local people. We're very early in that process, but I'm really excited to see what that becomes. We also will be looking at an asset-based approach through that design process. We'll be seeking 2 specific assets in this approach. The first is, who are the leaders within the communities we're trying to find? And the second is, what do those communities already have? We know in Gloucester, for example, that there is a strong Muslim community who have excellent indoor facilities and catering. But really what they're missing out on is an accessible outdoor venue to host events, where they can have their needs met, keeping dogs away from them, and providing a space to wash before prayer. An asset-based approach will help us find our strongest community contacts, as well as make sure we aren't trying to offer something they don't even need. We're working with our partners at Barnwood, Ismail especially, to help us understand how to properly communicate with different people and different communities through faith training in accessible communication, and attending events within the community around us will help us do that. We have a lot of space to play with, 3,500 hectares in the Cotswolds, and an impossible challenge of making the world accessible to all. Some people, for personal, health or faith reasons, do not like being approached by dogs. Others need a place to let their dogs off the leads for a bit. And there's a middle ground there as well. So we've got to find a place for them. A way we're planning to tackle that, and are in many National Trust sites in other portfolios, is through zoning of spaces. Dog-friendly spaces, no dog spaces, spaces for dogs on lead. Accessible routes, easy routes, challenging routes, cycle routes. Accessible toilets, prayer and multi-faith spaces, family rooms, quiet rooms, accessible parking, bike parking, EV parking, audio trails, sensory trails, a space to hire for events. These are options, you don't have to do them all. It's a journey and it won't happen overnight, but finding and facilitating spaces for everyone is a priority for us, locally and organisationally. And finally, of course, these relationships we're building are not relationships for a project, they don't have an end date. We will build them, keep them, value them, and keep in touch with them to make sure that we remain an asset for the community that we're built for. So, to round it all off really, our approach as an organisation, as a portfolio, to accessible and inclusive visitor experience, it's not a project, despite what it says on the screen here. It's a strategy, a belief, and it's our new business as usual. Thank you.